Birthdays used to mean something different. When I was a child, they were filled with balloon animals, cake frosting smeared on tiny faces, and laughter that bounced off the walls like music. As I grew older, birthdays became quieter, more symbolic, a private celebration of endurance, of growth. But ever since I met Mark, they'd become something else entirely. Magical. Or, at least they used to be. This year felt different. Not wrong. Just muted. Like music playing from another room, familiar, but distant. When I woke up that morning, the space beside me was already cold. Mark had left early. Again. No soft good morning, no kiss on the forehead. Just a folded note on the kitchen counter beside a single red rose, slightly wilted at the edges. Can't wait for tonight. Big surprise. Love you. M. I stared at the paper longer than I should have. The handwriting was unmistakably his, strong, angular, slightly rushed. The words were sweet, but they didn't feel like Mark. Not lately. There was something mechanical about it, as if he'd remembered just in time and scrambled to compensate. Still, I smiled. I told myself I was overthinking as usual. The sun was already climbing the sky. The apartment felt oddly quiet, like it was holding its breath. I wandered into the living room, half expecting a surprise waiting around the corner. Balloons, maybe. Breakfast. A goofy card. But there was nothing, only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace. I poured myself some coffee and sat by the window. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Mark and I laughing at a vineyard. Tina and me in matching robes on our spa weekend. Derek, Mark's best friend, photobombing nearly every group shot. We looked so whole, happy. But when had that begun to unravel? Over the past few months, Mark had been more distracted, his warmth dulled by something I couldn't name. When I'd ask if everything was okay, he'd smile and deflect. Just work, babe. You know how it is. But he hadn't looked at me the same way. His eyes, once searching and kind, had become elsewhere. Tina noticed it too. You sure you're okay? She'd ask over wine nights, curling her legs beneath her on my couch, eyes full of concern. I'd always nod. Yeah. Just a phase. She was always there when I needed her. Ever since college, we'd been inseparable. She was the one who convinced me to go on that blind date with Mark. The irony wasn't lost on me. That afternoon, I got ready slowly. I pulled out the emerald dress Mark once said made me look like poetry. I hadn't worn it in over a year. It clung a little tighter now, but I didn't mind. I curled my hair, dabbed on his favorite perfume, and stood in front of the mirror for longer than necessary. I wanted to feel beautiful, desired. At 6:30, my phone buzzed. Be ready in 15. Don't ask questions. Trust me. Trust me. I felt something tighten in my chest. It wasn't suspicion, not yet. It was more like intuition stretching its limbs. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mark grinning, eyes sparkling like they used to. Behind him stood Derek, holding a bottle of champagne, and Tina, already filming with her phone. Happy birthday, gorgeous. Tina chirped, lunging forward to hug me. She smelled like gardenias. Expensive, intoxicating, slightly overwhelming. Mark stepped forward and kissed my cheek. Hope you're ready. Tonight's all about you. He blindfolded me before I could protest. His hands lingered a little longer on my shoulders, which sent a confused flutter through me. It felt rehearsed. Where are we going? I laughed, feigning ease. No peeking, he whispered. I was led down the stairs, into a car. We drove for what felt like forever. Tina played music and giggled with Derek in the front seat. Mark held my hand, but not tightly. It was like he was holding a stranger's hand out of obligation. When we finally stopped, they helped me out and removed the blindfold. We were standing outside a cozy, lantern-lit cabin in the woods. A ribbon was tied across the front door, and fairy lights glimmered around the porch railing. A banner read, "Happy birthday, Elena." For a moment, I was speechless. You rented a cabin? I asked, trying to mask my confusion. For the weekend, Mark said. Just the four of us. Thought it'd be nice to unplug. I forced a smile. It's lovely. But something didn't sit right. The banner was lopsided. The lights looked hastily strung. And Tina, standing beside Mark, had her hand resting on his back like it belonged there. We stepped inside. There was wine. A small cake. Music playing softly. It should have felt intimate, special. Instead, it felt curated, like a scene constructed for someone else's romance. The evening unfolded in flashes. We played board games. Derek made inappropriate jokes that Tina laughed a little too hard at. Mark barely looked at me, instead always checking his phone or sharing private smiles with her. At one point, Tina dared Mark to take a shot off her neck. I laughed awkwardly, expecting him to deflect. But he didn't. He leaned in, slowly, and did it, grinning at her while she blushed theatrically. It was meant to be funny, innocent. But my stomach churned. I excused myself and stepped outside for air. The night was cold, the forest quiet. I stood barefoot on the porch, letting the wind sting my skin, hoping it would numb the ache in my chest. Why did I feel like a guest at my own celebration? Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Lana, my younger sister. How's the birthday? Still think Tina's just a friend. I stared at the message, heart pounding. Lana never liked Tina, always said she was too territorial with Mark. I always thought she was being dramatic. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked back through the cabin window. Inside, Tina was laughing at something Mark whispered. She threw her head back, touching his chest lightly as she did. He didn't pull away. The moment was brief. Blink and you'd miss it. But I didn't blink. And suddenly, that blindfold from earlier felt like more than just a birthday game. It felt symbolic. Convenient. Pull. Still, I walked back inside, smile fixed, voice light. Because I wasn't ready to admit what I was beginning to suspect. Not on my birthday. The night pressed on like a play, where I was no longer the lead. I smiled, I nodded, I laughed in the right places, but I wasn't really there. I was watching myself from a distance, like I'd slipped out of my own skin. Inside the cabin, the lights were warm, almost too warm, and the air held the faint scent of pine and red wine. Derek poured another round of drinks, his voice booming as he told some exaggerated story about a work trip gone wrong. Tina leaned into Mark, her laughter high-pitched and unfiltered. I sat across from them, glass in hand, trying not to stare too long at the space between their bodies. It was barely noticeable, but it was there. The tilt of her shoulder toward his hand resting on the couch cushion behind her. The way their eyes met during jokes they didn't bother explaining. Truth or dare? Tina asked suddenly, as if reading from a script. Mark grinned. We're really doing this? Why not? She shrugged. Birthday girl goes first. I hesitated, swirling wine in my glass. Truth. Derek groaned. Boring. Tina leaned forward. Okay. If you could change one thing about your marriage, what would it be? I felt the question cut through the air, like a razor. Mark raised an eyebrow, the smile on his lips thin. I took a slow sip. I'd ask for more honesty, I said quietly, even when it's inconvenient. Tina's face froze for just a second before she laughed. Oof. That was deep. Okay, your turn. The game continued, but the rules had changed. Every question felt like a coded message. Every dare a line drawn further from innocence. When it was Tina's turn, Derek dared her to kiss someone in the room who was a Mark. She glanced at me, then at Derek, then laughed and leaned over to peck Derek on the cheek. But Mark's eyes followed her the entire time, like a tether that couldn't be stretched too far. Later, Mark disappeared into the kitchen to grab another bottle of wine. Tina followed without a word. I waited, staring at the flickering candle on the coffee table. 1 minute. 2. Then I heard laughter, low, hushed, intimate. I stood up slowly, careful not to draw attention, and walked to the hallway just in time to catch the tail end of a whisper. Can't keep doing this here, Mark said. Relax, Tina replied, her voice breathy. She doesn't suspect anything. I froze. The words hit me like cold water. I pressed myself against the wall, my breath shallow, air straining. Mark said something I couldn't hear. Then silence. Then more laughter. I retreated before they saw me, ducking into the guest room and closing the door quietly behind me. My fingers trembled as I reached for the nightstand lamp. A soft glow lit the room, revealing a designer overnight bag sitting on the chair. It was Tina's. A small gold charm dangled from the zipper, engraved with her initials. I don't know what compelled me to unzip it. Inside were clothes, makeup, and something that made my blood turn to ice, a black lace negligee, folded neatly on top. I stared at it unblinking. Beneath it, a small perfume bottle. My perfume. The one Mark bought me last year on our anniversary. I put everything back exactly as it was and stepped away, my limbs wooden. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Back in the living room, Tina and Mark had returned, their expressions unchanged, their conversation seamless. I sat down slowly. Derek offered me a fresh drink. I declined. The room suddenly felt too small, too loud, too staged. Like a dream constructed to keep me sedated. The laughter didn't sound real anymore. It echoed strangely, distorted by betrayal. Mark leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" I met his eyes. "Just tired." He nodded, turning back to the others, his concern evaporating instantly. That's when I realized something chilling. This night wasn't about me. It never was. The surprise wasn't for me. It was for them. A chance to legitimize something forbidden under the disguise of celebration. Later, as the group drifted into smaller conversations and Derek began snoring softly on the couch, I slipped outside again. The forest was cloaked in quiet. The moonlight spilled over the clearing, silver and cold. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at Lana's last message. "Still think Tina's just a friend?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed back. "No. I don't. I didn't send it." I tucked the phone away and sat on the porch swing, wrapping my arms around myself. The wooden slats creaked beneath me. Behind the glass of the cabin window, Mark and Tina were standing close together again, laughing, whispering. Her hand brushed his arm, casual but proprietary. He didn't move away. A dull ache spread through my chest like a bruise blooming under the surface. I thought back to the first time Mark brought Tina up in conversation years ago. "She's basically your twin," he'd said. "You two are so close, it's kind of intimidating." Back then, I laughed it off. I was flattered that he admired our friendship. I never imagined that admiration would twist into something else. Something darker. The door creaked open behind me. It was Mark. He stepped out quietly and sat beside me, sighing as he stretched his arms. "Nice night, huh?" he said, looking up at the stars. I didn't respond. He glanced at me. "You've been quiet. I'm tired." He nodded. "It's been a long day." We sat in silence. The air between us was heavy with unspoken truths. He stood up after a moment. "Don't stay out too long, okay?" I watched him walk back inside, the door clicking shut behind him. I stayed outside until the chills sank into my bones, until the moon climbed higher, until the lie we were all living felt too loud to ignore. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I stood slowly, walked to the edge of the porch, and stared out at the woods, at the dark, unknowable shapes in the trees. Something had broken tonight. Something small but vital. A fracture so deep I knew it couldn't be undone. And tomorrow, I would have to decide what to do with the pieces. The morning after never lies. Sunlight slipped between the pine slats of the cabin walls, too bright, too clean for the heaviness in my chest. I lay in bed fully clothed, curled into the edge of the mattress, watching motes of dust drift through the light like ghosts of the night before. My birthday had come and gone, but the aftertaste lingered, sour and metallic, like a lie you swallow too many times. I could hear the muffled clatter of pans in the kitchen. Laughter again. Tina's high and bright. Mark's deeper, slower. Familiar. Too familiar. I got up, smoothed my dress from the night before, and padded barefoot to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, stared at my reflection. My eyes looked foreign, darker, heavier. Like I'd aged years in one night. By the time I joined them, Breakfast was already half served. Derek was sipping coffee, bleary-eyed. Tina flipped pancakes like a homemaker in a commercial. Mark stood behind her, his hand briefly brushing her lower back. Something about the ease of it, the seamless choreography, made me nauseous. "Morning, birthday girl," Tina sang, her tone too sweet. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock," I lied, sitting across from her. Mark leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "We were thinking of hitting the lake after breakfast. Get some air, maybe hike the trail behind the cabin." I nodded. "Sounds good." Nobody mentioned the negligee in Tina's bag, or the way she and Mark had moved around each other like magnets, or how I'd overheard them whispering in the kitchen like thieves. But I wasn't playing the fool anymore. I was just waiting, watching. Breakfast passed in awkward pleasantries and half-smiles. I excused myself afterward and wandered outside, claiming I needed to make a phone call. Instead, I circled the back of the cabin, stood beneath the kitchen window, and waited. They didn't make me wait long. "She's starting to notice," Tina murmured. "She doesn't know anything," Mark said. "She's just suspicious. We've been careful." My hands curled into fists. Careful. As if my trust was something they could tiptoe around. As if love could be navigated with strategy instead of sincerity. "We can't keep sneaking around like this," Tina whispered. "I know," Mark replied. "Just give me a little more time." "How much time do you need, Mark?" Silence. "Then, I'm working on it." That was enough. I stepped back quietly and returned through the front door, my expression blank. I didn't feel like crying anymore. I didn't feel like yelling. I felt like steel pulled tight across my spine. When they returned to the living room, I was seated on the couch, waiting. Mark froze when he saw me. Tina's smile faltered. "Everything okay?" he asked. I tilted my head. "You tell me." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "You said this weekend was about me. A surprise. A celebration." "It was." "No," I said calmly. "It was about hiding. About pretending. About using my birthday as a cover for your affair." Tina paled. "Elena." I held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." Mark ran a hand through his hair, his voice lowering. "Elena, you're jumping to conclusions. You're emotional. Don't you dare weaponize my emotions."
"Not now."
Derek looked up, suddenly alert, sensing the temperature in the room shift.
"Wait."
"What's going on?" I turned to him. "Ask your best friend and his co-conspirator." Mark exhaled hard. "Okay.
"Fine."
We crossed a line.
"A few times."
But it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I laughed once, bitterly. "You cheated on me with my best friend. On my birthday. In front of me." Tina stepped forward. "It wasn't about hurting you, Elena." "No, of course not. It was about satisfying yourselves. About using my trust like a doormat while you made excuses for betrayal." Tina's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to fall for him. And I didn't mean to be made a fool of." Mark took a step closer. "Elena, listen."
"No."
"You listen. We are done. Not just you and me," I said, turning to Tina. "But us too. Friendship doesn't survive this kind of rot." Silence. The room was thick with shame, the aftermath of truth unwrapped. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed my small duffel, and returned to the front door. Derek stood up, still stunned. "You want to ride back to the city?" he asked gently. I looked at Mark, then at Tina, both frozen in the wreckage of their own making. "No," I said. "I'll take the train. I need the distance." Mark opened his mouth as if to speak, but said nothing. I stepped outside, letting the door click behind me. The air was sharp with morning frost, but I didn't flinch. I walked down the gravel path, my boots crunching the stones, my heart steady. The weight I carried wasn't from heartbreak, it was from clarity. By the time I reached the main road, I pulled out my phone and called Lana. She answered on the first ring. "Well," she asked. "You were right," I said. "About everything." There was silence on the line. Then, "I'm sorry, Elena." "Don't be. I needed to see it for myself. Do you want me to come get you?" I smiled faintly.
"No."
"I'll be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Because sometimes the greatest gift isn't love or loyalty or celebration. It's truth. Ugly, unfiltered, undeniable truth. And now that I had it, I could finally begin again.